Hmm. Well, I wanted to start out, someone was asking if we do the refuge and bodhicitta prayers, and the way I structure this whole session is to really honor anybody who doesn't consider themselves a Buddhist. So I think we'll do it in an informal way, or in a non-religious, secular way, just to keep the context of this retreat. Um, if that's okay with people that you asked for, so I thought that would be. But I have a feeling there's a lot of Buddhists here. Just raise your hand if you're Buddhist, everybody. I don't know. Is everybody? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, I'll keep that in mind as we do the retreat, and we'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, why don't we? What I wanted to do actually was start with a 1 minute meditation, and this is something that's particularly helpful when for like beginners or people who aren't Buddhists, because a lot of my friends come to me and say, "Oh, I used to have a meditation practice, but I stopped." Or how do I start a meditation practice? I don't have enough time. And I say you can meditate for 1 minute. So that's what I wanted to start out with. Although there's kind of like a 2 minute introduction to a 1 minute meditation, since we're just starting. But let's do that. Uh, it also helps me get into more of a meditative state to lead the session. So settle yourself into meditation posture. If you're in a chair, like most of us, your feet flat on the floor. If you're on a cushion, then you cross your legs. I'll tell you something beautiful I learned from my teacher, Venerable Renee, recently. This is actually the only thing I would probably change in the book. Because there's this posture when you meditate that you put your right hand on top of your left and touch your thumbs. And the way Venerable Renee explained it to us recently is that your left hand represents wisdom, understanding the ultimate interdependent nature of reality. And your right hand represents compassion, or compassionate action in the world. And then your thumbs touching represents concentration. So it's a wonderful reminder when you sit down to meditate to remember those three things: is emptiness, compassion, and concentration. And then leave a little space between your arms, which helps not get too hot if that's a problem. Straighten your spine, which is the most important part. Tilt down your head. Almost close your eyes, as a lot of you know, helps support meditation without falling asleep, to go inward. Then relax all the muscles in your face, your brow, your shoulders. Touch your tongue to the palate above your top teeth. And then we can set a motivation that the discussion and meditation that we have tonight and through the weekend be a cause of increasing our good qualities, diminishing the harmful or annoying ways of thinking that we sometimes have, strengthen our relationships, and help to build a better world in whatever way we each can. And then it can be very encouraging to think of the support for that in people, beings we know that are further along the path than we are. It's what you call refuge if you're Buddhist. So you can think of beings more advanced than we are, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, or people like Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., Desmond Tutu, Nelson Mandela. And what's encouraging is that they weren't born that way. Each of them worked at it gradually, day by day, minute by minute, letting go of disturbing ways of thinking, cultivating constructive, beneficial ones. And we can do that too. And we see people like that not just in these outsized heroes, but in people we know. We all know people in our life that have never said a harmful word about another person, that always seem to work for others. Many of them aren't Buddhists. You know, you don't have to be Buddhist to be that. So think of them as encouragement that we all can do that. And then let's bring our mind to our breath for that 1 minute meditation. You can focus on your breath. This is another nice tip I heard from Venerable Renee recently. You can focus on your breath at your nostrils, which enhances concentration, or you can focus on your breath at your chest, which expands openness, or you can focus on your breath at your abdomen, which increases groundedness. So just think for an instant which of those you might want to work on for 1 minute, and then bring your mind to that place. And you just try to watch your breath there. Your mind will naturally drift away, and when it does, just steer it back and let whatever thought, feeling, plan, regret just fade away. Something we learn about our minds is that everything that comes into it naturally disappears. So you don't need to pull other thoughts close or push them away. They'll just naturally disappear. So just for 1 minute, focus on the breath. And there's one last thing to draw from the 1 minute meditation, which is that it's very good to quit while you're ahead. I think, especially for people here who are seasoned Buddhists, um, don't want to meditate till it hurts, right? It doesn't feel good. And also, it creates a pattern. You know, the more you do something, the more you feel that way, the more you do it. So it's very nice. It's actually a lesson not just for meditation, but for all of life, to quit while you're ahead. And I think a few of us take that advice, but it's wonderful. And sometimes you see very famous people who've done it are very happy. People get confused at their behavior, but it's very wise to quit while you're, you know, everything except life. I think life you want to ride out as long as possible. But hopefully you still do keep getting ahead until the very end. So this retreat is on How to Train a Happy Mind, which is a book. It's also a podcast that I started 5 years ago because I've been a Buddhist in this tradition for 25 years, and I was invited to start teaching 18 years ago. And then quite quickly, I saw we weren't quite meeting people with the promise we were giving them for our Monday night and Saturday morning, Tuesday nights and Saturday morning meditations by saying, everyone's welcome. You don't have to be a Buddhist. But then they come and in like the first topic, we'd start mentioning karma, rebirth, other realms. You know, it comes in the precious life. And so I started making notes for it about 10 years ago. And also talking to my teachers, and especially there's a book by His Holiness the Dalai Lama called Beyond Religion. Did anyone see this book here? Okay, these are fantastic. That was the big inspiration for this. And so that was the idea, was to make as authentic as possible a version of the lamrim. That's what this book really has, but lamrim for non-Buddhists wouldn't be as catchy of a title for a book, How to Train a Happy Mind. And but that's what it is. It's a version of the lamrim to practice analytical meditation as authentically as you can. Um, if you don't believe in those things, or if you have some remaining doubts about them, like most of us weren't raised in a Buddhist culture. Um, for people that don't know, is anybody, I don't know, it's hard to see on the Zoom too. Is anybody on the Zoom not a newcomer who doesn't consider themselves a Buddhist too? Just so I understand. Raise your virtual hand if you consider yourself, if you don't consider yourself a Buddhist. No. Okay. Is that right? Nobody? Okay. Oh, you. Oh, hi. Great. Okay. So I'm going to balance this out, um, because many, how many of you have had a friend who said, "Oh, I'm not really any religion, but if I was, I'd be a Buddhist." It's one of the most common things I hear when I tell people I'm a Buddhist. And the Dalai Lama. So the Dalai Lama wrote in his book, he had this nice quote: "Give up religion, give up Buddhism." Oh, actually, no, this is from Lama Yeshe, actually. He said, "Give up religion, give up Buddhism, go beyond Buddhism, put the essential aspects of the philosophy into scientific language." That's a pretty strong statement for Lama Yeshe to say, the founder of this organization. Give up Buddhism? What does that mean exactly? So anyway, because His Holiness the Dalai Lama wrote that book, Lama Yeshe encouraged it. I thought it was an okay thing to do. Now, the most surprising is this book has a foreword by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. That really shocked me, and it probably shocks you. So, and what he said about it is that he liked the contents of the book because Tibetan culture doesn't just have religion to offer the world; it also has philosophy and science. And the science in the Tibetan culture is a science of the mind, like a very deeply understood science of the mind. Um, when I lead these sessions, I try to make them what Venerable Rabina says calls tasty. I don't know if anyone has ever heard. She's one of my teachers too. She said, I like to make these teachings tasty, and they are very tasty to me. I never get tired of them. Some people, when they're writing a book, they get really sick of it because they keep reading it over and over again. But this particular book, not because I love my own words, but because it's like doing a retreat. It's like doing a lamrim retreat over and over again. For those who don't know what the lamrim is, I want to say what it's based on. It means the graduated path, which means an ordered sequence of the Buddha's teachings. The Buddha, they say, gave 84,000 teachings. He lived into his 80s. Sometimes I imagine, what if Jesus Christ had lived into his 80s, right? I bet he would have taught a lot of the same things. Because he said things like, love your enemies, turn the other cheek. But he didn't say how. It was like really succinct. Maybe he did and it was lost, actually, the teachings. But the Lamrim says how. And the Buddha said how in extraordinary detail. Um, but the Lamrim was made in general for monks and nuns in the Buddhist culture. It was created 1,000 years ago by a teacher, Dipankara. And then it was revised 500 years ago by Lama Tsongkhapa, who I think is there behind me or on the walls here. He was in the waiting room in a tanka. Um, but even though it's practiced by Buddhists, it's not in Buddhism. It's even considered kind of a minor transgression to proselytize. It's good to spread the Dharma, but you shouldn't be going around telling people they should become Buddhists. I talked to Geshe Namdak. Has he ever been here, Geshe Namdak? Oh, he's a wonderful, wonderful, one of the first Western geshes. The geshe degree is a 20-year degree, kind of like a PhD in Buddhism, but it takes a lot longer. And he teaches now at the Jamyang Center in London. And he said the purpose of Buddhism isn't to make more Buddhists, but to make happy minds, which I think is very true and very wise. You know, the last time I was here, I ended up getting derailed. I gave a lecture on renunciation, and there was someone who had a big debate because they said they didn't want to be happy, and it really got me thinking and researching a lot actually after I gave that talk here. And I went and looked it up. I was like, and I asked some of my teachers, I found a speech the Dalai Lama gave where it said the purpose of life is to be happy. So, that's one like data point. Um, the other thing the Dalai Lama says is that happiness comes from making other people happy. That's the main cause. Something I found really effective though, that one of my teachers said to me recently, because some people still say like, oh, I don't want to be happy. I want to be like, I want to have a fulfilling life, or I want to gain realizations or something like that. But I found an even more compelling argument for those who still disagree, which is that only person, another happy. I think that's hard to disagree with. Like, when have you found a very grumpy, mean person who cheered somebody up? Um, so the other thing I wanted to say for those of you, especially those of you who are Buddhists and longtime practitioners, I bet some of you have been practicing longer than I have, is that one thing you may get out of this is that it may offer you some creative new ways to share the Dharma with friends and acquaintances that don't seem as religious or supernatural as some of the things that we practice and we do. Um, and the other thing I found is also that even longtime Western Buddhist practitioners often have lingering doubts about karma, rebirth, other realms, which is reasonable. And so to honestly admit them and talk about them, debate them, and even think, oh, how could I still practice effectively if I don't believe that or fully believe that, would be beneficial too. So we're going to go through I'm planning to go through a lot of topics, like 2/3 of the book. We'll see. Maybe we'll do 7 instead of 8. But tonight we're starting just on what is analytical meditation, which is kind of like, I think if you wanted more like a clickbait title, it would be like, you know, 10 things, or 7 things meditation isn't, or 10 surprising revelations about meditation. Um, so tonight we're going to talk about that. What's analytical meditation? And I think we'll get started with what is the mind, which is kind of like the 0th topic, like the topic before you start the lamrim, because the lamrim says it's a way to steer your mind toward happiness. But if you're doing that, then you would need to know what a mind is. So we'll talk a little bit about that too. That's a fun topic. So yeah, let's start a little bit about analytical meditation. Meditation has become very popular, right? It's a popular as a therapy. So popular as a therapy to sleep better, to reduce stress, to concentrate better. But for Buddhists, which I think a lot of us here know, meditation's purpose, those are like side effects of meditation. The purpose of meditation is to bring out our best qualities. That's the best way I've found to explain meditation to people who aren't Buddhists. And then people ask, what are our positive qualities? Openness, compassion, kindness, generosity, patience, gratitude, joy. Um, would anyone like to reflect on how you measure whether your meditation is successful? Anybody want to? There you go. Yeah, that's a good one. If you're expressing one of those qualities, that's good. Anything else? Yeah, that's good that you've actually done it. Yeah, that's really good. Um, Anything else?
I'm sorry, we didn't hear that in
Oh,
on Zoom.
the question was, what do you think is the measure of meditation success?
And what was the thing that you laughed at?
Oh, you didn't hear the answer. Yeah. Well, one person said it was if you develop all those good qualities that we just talked about. Another person said just that you've done it, which is actually, I think, really wise. I haven't heard someone say that before. That's a good answer. Um, oh, good. Yeah, we have to answer. Some people would say it's how long you concentrate, um, or sometimes it's having cool visions, right? Has anyone ever gone to their teacher with a cool vision? What did they say? Can you, I don't know if you're willing to say, what did your teacher tell you when you had a cool vision?
She said that well, it was a frightening vision, but it was very cool. It was like drowning in this emptiness thing.
Yeah.
And she said, well, you didn't have enough merit to go there. That's why you panicked.
Okay. All right. I've had cool visions too. And whenever I went to my teacher to talk about them, my teacher said, oh, that's very nice. How are things going with your wife? And so that actually points to an answer I first received from Venerable Sangye Kadro. Has she ever been to teach here, Venerable? Oh, she's so wonderful. Because I asked her, what's the measure of meditation success? And she said, your relationships get better. And I quoted her in the book. She read this whole book actually before it was released, and she corrected me because she said, oh, I didn't say that. It was actually Lama Yeshe who said that. So it's a good authority. And it's really an extraordinary measure because, and it's quite humbling too, because you can, I say from experience, you can think you had a great meditation session and then come downstairs and have an argument with your wife, you know, partner, whatever. I think this thing about relationships is really interesting and it's not as emphasized in Buddhism, but when science asks what's the largest measure of happiness, a cause of happiness, I was just reading this today. There's a big article about it in the New York Times. They said it's fulfilling relationships. That's actually, the thing that does make people happy and satisfied. I think it's nice to mention that. I think a lot of times in our tradition, and they also even say in some of our prayers and texts, go alone and silently meditate in the woods. Um, but if you want to benefit others, I think you probably need to be around them and have good relationships with them, right? So there's two types of meditation we generally learn about. One is stabilizing meditation, that is calm-inducing, focusing, uh, promotes non-reactivity. It's often known as mindfulness meditation. You know, um, it's often the only type of meditation most people know. In this tradition, there's this second type of meditation that doesn't occur in some other Buddhist traditions, and is greatly emphasized and elaborated, which is called analytical meditation. I wish there was a less intellectual way to say that word, analytical meditation. If anyone ever comes up with one, I think we should, because it doesn't capture like the juiciness and the emotional storytelling aspect of it. It's a type of meditation that steers your mind towards its positive qualities, uses stories, emotions. You could almost call it emotional meditation. It also leverages critical thinking. And the kind of earliest form of critical thinking you would typically have in analytical meditation is to examine your thoughts and ask, is this thought beneficial or harmful to myself, to others? Which ones do I want to cultivate? And which ones do I want to let go? We live in a wonderful time because this truth that's been taught for millennia has now validated scientifically. There's a principle called neuroplasticity, which wasn't even did when I was young. And that is that every single thought we have reinforces our tendency to have it again. It's that simple. Every action, of course, too. And so when you think about what you do, think about all the things you did today. Where did it come from? It came from family, friends, school, work, movies, social media, advertisements. Um, and so what analytical meditation does is it gives you tools to take control of your own mind that's mostly been influenced from outside unconsciously for most of our lives. Analytical meditation relates to cognitive behavioral therapy. Does anybody know about that, this is a new therapy that's exactly analytical meditation. It encourages you to look critically at your thoughts, steer yourselves to beneficial ones, realize that some are harmful. Also, something called positive psychology that also didn't exist when I was in college. When I was in college, I registered for a psychology class, like first semester, because I thought I really wanted to understand my mind and how to bring about its best qualities. I went and picked up the textbook. This happened with many colleges, many classes in college. I was in college in the 80s and 90s. Picked up the textbook, looked through it, and it was only about problems. You know, a psychology textbook, it was only about all the different psychological problems people have, like narcissism, sociopathy, depression. There was nothing in the book about what I wanted to learn about. So I returned it. You know, in college they let you get the book and then return it. So I returned it unregistered for the class. But now we're lucky because there's a field called positive psychology that was just pioneered in like 1998. You know, the head of the American Psychological Association started encouraging people to pursue it, and now it's a whole area of psychology. Great thing about analytical meditation, and this is a nice thing to share with friends, is that it's a lot easier, I've found, for people to practice um, than mindfulness meditation. It's very, very difficult to focus on your breath. It's more like listening to a podcast than staring at a wall, which is one form of, you know, Zen meditation. So one way you can think about it is that it's a story you tell yourself while you're with your eyes closed, sitting on a cushion, that helps you better understand your mind and reality. But these two things work together. You know, of course, if you can't concentrate, then how are you going to think about the analytical meditation topics or anything else? And also, Venerable Sangye Kadro just wrote a great book called How to Meditate on the lamrim that I'm reading right now. And she was very precise because she said, actually, even when you're going through the kind of analytical parts of analytical meditation, like going through the thoughts, it's still not technically the meditation. That the meditation is when that gets combined with concentration and you have a feeling. And we call that a realization. So realization is when something becomes real in your mind. That a good example is like with love. You know, when you were young, you know, you read about love stories before you fell in love, probably even in elementary school and in middle school. But when the first time you actually fell in love, if you're lucky enough to have fallen in love, um, then you understood what it really is, right? And so realization is that when something becomes real, when you feel it in every cell of your body, and when you have that, I think probably people in this room have had that with many different topics. When you have that, and you let go of the words, the story, the thoughts, and you just try to hold on to it with stable concentration. I also like to mention that like realizations for the lamrim aren't necessarily that difficult to have, at least for the earlier topics. They're the ordinary result of someone just sincerely practicing the Dharma. We can, especially in this tradition, we can have a we have very high examples of what realization is, and then our extraordinary teachers like His Holiness will say, "Oh, I make gradual progress every 5 years." But they do say that the Lamrim topics, that you can realize them during a retreat, you know, over the course of an intensive week, meditating on one topic, or a month, or maybe a half hour, an hour a day. And probably people here have had that for different topics at different times. You can lose the realization too. But I think it's nice to be encouraging and say, you know, realizations are possible. Realizing emptiness, or, you know, true love and compassion, those are very advanced, difficult. But realizing, say, impermanence, you know, some of the earlier topics, or how precious life is, like we can do that. So yeah, here's an example, you know, of how analytical meditation works, which I like to talk about in the context of craving. So in this form of Buddhism is part of a strain of Buddhism called Mahayana Buddhism, which is the Buddhism that's concerned with benefiting others. It has a wonderful altruistic um, core. And so in Mahayana Buddhism, we're not encouraged to give up pleasure, which is actually kind of encouraging. In like there are a lot of Buddhism, some other strains of Buddhism, you are encouraged to give it up. And we'll talk more about that. Actually, if I come back, when I come back, hopefully, we'll do those. There's those the topics we're not going to have time for this time: love, compassion, emptiness. But when I do, we're going to talk more about how to work with pleasure. But what you do try to give up, you're not encouraged to give up pleasure, relationships, fun, but the more addictive or egocentric way that we sometimes approach them, which spoils the experience. And so, ask yourself, have you ever reached for another cookie even while you're still eating the first one? That's a good example. It's a small example, but or younger people. I just gave a talk at a university, Northeastern University, which is now in the West. So it's actually like West Northeastern University. It's kind of funny. But I said to these kids who are all like 18 or 19, I said, have you ever swiped right? See, I've never used the apps, but swiping right is yes, swiping right. Anyway, I think swiping right is right, right? So have you ever swiped right looking for your next hookup just moments after you enjoyed the last? And it was pretty amazing being in my spot, talking to them, because about half of those kids were like, there was a smoker who was in the class once who told me about reaching for a cigarette while he had one lit in his hand, smoking a cigarette and grab. So I think we can all relate to that with our own places. And with analytical meditation, you can develop a healthy attitude towards pleasure, success, human connection. I think it's one of the great outcomes of it. And I talk about that over and over again, is that analytical meditation helps you feel the present and enjoy moments of pleasure and connection um, much more when you accept that uh, pleasure is impermanent, relationships are impermanent. Instead of being gripped by like compulsive desire and this like tightness, wanting things not to change. Okay, the next kind of fun fact about meditation is that it's not necessarily relaxing, which probably people in this room know if you try to relax. Like you were saying, meditation, a good session is one that you complete. You did it. And here's why. So if you think of meditation just as a way to relax, then you start to compare it with all the other ways of relaxing. Like today, I went for 2 really nice walks. This is such a beautiful place to be outdoors. I went for 2 beautiful walks, and they were really relaxing. Um, you might compare it to taking a hot tub, right? If you have a hot tub, it's very relaxing, or a bath. Watching Netflix is very relaxing. Um, Having a drink is very relaxing. Smoking a cigarette. So honestly, if you compare meditation with those like 7 other things, is meditation really the most relaxing one? Is that the one you choose to relax? And so that's where it helps to look back to the purpose of meditation, which is that it's like physical exercise. You don't always do it because it feels good, but because it really makes you healthy. You're going to live another 20 years and your day is going to feel good too. And that's the same thing with meditation. The purpose is to make yourself mentally healthy, to bring out your best qualities, deepen your relationships, and even build a better world. Okay, the other surprising fact about meditation is that it's not necessarily virtuous. And that may come as a surprise to some people. So, um, one way this is true is that there's an idea called spiritual bypass. Has anyone ever heard this term, spiritual bypass? This is a really useful new term I hadn't heard, even, I don't know, 10 years ago even. And this is when you use meditation as an escape to just to recharge and go out and continue doing harm to yourself and the world. I did it when I had a job that I really didn't believe in. I felt like I was doing some unethical things at my workplace, and I would come home, and then it's usually the next morning, I would meditate and kind of process all of those things, then recharge and go back to that job to do things that I didn't think were beneficial. And so that's one way where meditation just becomes like recharge, but doesn't affect, if it doesn't affect how you act in daily life, then it's not that beneficial. The other really striking example of how meditation can be used harmfully is the way the military uses meditation. So the US military uses mindfulness training in two ways. One way is they use it to treat PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. There's probably a VA hospital. Is there a VA hospital here or Albuquerque? Albuquerque, yeah. So they're probably using it there. And it really works. It really helps people let go of the trauma they experienced in conflicts, in violent conflict. The other way the military uses meditation is in training soldiers to kill. And they literally actually looked it up to make sure this was true. But they actually, the instruction books actually say, like, breathe in as you aim your gun, breathe out as you squeeze the trigger. Can you believe that, right? And I'm not saying there couldn't be those rare times you really have to kill somebody to stop them. But in general, that's at the very least neutral and quite likely harmful use of meditation. So I like that striking example because it shows meditation isn't necessarily virtuous. And you'll see people bragging about their meditation. You see certain CEOs, bragging about their exercise meditation routine and then making harmful products. So it doesn't necessarily make you a better person. It can make you more effective at doing things that aren't beneficial. The other example I like to use, a little lighter, is the one from Star Wars. So did anyone see The Empire Strikes Back? This just came out in like 1981 or something. It's the second Star Wars movie. I love this. This is my favorite Star Wars movie. In this movie, whenever Darth Vader's constantly meditating, he actually has a black lotus, like this giant black lotus that he goes into. And it just seems like whenever he's not killing people, he's meditating. They call it the force, that he's going to be one with the force, but he's meditating. And so I like to say, don't be like Darth Vader. You don't want your meditation to be like that. Because traditionally, meditation can't be separated from ethics. That's what's a little scary about mindfulness, is that in some forms it has been detached from ethics. Buddhist ethics can be summarized very simply. I got this from Alan Wallace. He said Buddhist ethics is principle one, nonviolence. Just that is pretty shocking. If you went and asked 100 people on the street, what's your first principle of ethics? How many of them would say about nonviolence? But it's really wonderful to hear that. Principle two, kindness. Principle three, understanding your mind. That's pretty striking. And it's relatively unique when you compare it to other ethical systems and other religions. Not that other systems don't value those things, but to put those three particular ones first is really striking. And so there's a step of meditation that we did in our 1 minute meditation, which is motivation. And that's the part of the meditation where you just say, may this meditation be a cause of my own happiness, deep, fulfilling relationships, a better world. That's all it takes, actually. It's just like one sentence to turn your mindfulness meditation into virtuous. Just say that. Something we to talk back about work again. If you work in a Dharma center, like some of us do, before I don't know if you do. I don't know if you did this, Venerable Tantra, but when we did at other Dharma centers I worked at the beginning of a work meeting, we'd always say, "May our work benefit others." And I always dreamed that we had done that at these other companies I worked at. I felt like just that would solve so many problems. Because how cynical, I don't think people could be that cynical, to sit down in a meeting and say, "Oh, may our work benefit others," and then, start harming them. Anyway, I've never had the car. I've ran a couple companies myself, and I don't know, I always felt it was too preachy to do that, but boy, do I think it would be a good thing to do. The last thing I want to say is that there is this scientific validation for meditation, but it's generally only for mindfulness meditation. Um, People have studied compassion meditation, which is a form of analytical meditation, but not analytical. Like I couldn't find one study, and I asked scientists when I was writing this book. I ran into some scientists at a neuroscience conference I was at last month, and they explained why. Because they said it's just so too difficult to measure. Because to measure whether analytical meditation works, you'd have to measure someone's character to see that they had become kinder, more generous, more patient. A lot of the ways you'd have to measure that is actually by asking all the people around the person how they had changed. So I did meet one scientist who said he'd be willing to try, but they'd be behind to be long studies and kind of expensive and complicated. The last thing is that analytical meditation doesn't end when you get up off the cushion. You know, the point is to infuse how you see reality, how you treat other people, how you treat the planet too. Sometimes I get a little surprised actually, like in my center where I teach at Gyuto Foundation in near Berkeley, California, where I live. We always hand out these little plastic water bottles to everybody, like the tiniest ones, like a 4-ounce plastic water bottle or what, 8 ounce. And it kind of breaks my heart because I know that's really bad for the planet. Killing my daughter when she sees those bottles, she's like, "Don't kill turtles." You know? So, but I should probably take that on to talk to the center about it. Like we think we're being nice, offering everybody a little water. Okay, so let's move on to the first talk. By the way, do we normally take any little like bathroom break or something, or just go through 90 minutes? It's okay. Just go. Okay. So this first topic is what is the mind? That's what I call it. And I like to begin it actually by talking about two early attempts at meditation I took. One might be like some of you, where I read a book by Thich Nhat Hanh like 28 years ago, and I got curious about meditation because he described how cool it was and how beneficial. So I put down the book, I sat on my bed, and not much happened. It was just like I just heard my thoughts, and they were just the same as thoughts as when I was walking around. I was like, okay, well that didn't work. Um, the second time was led by Venerable Rene, who I mentioned a lot because he's my closest teacher. He was a student of Lamrim. And that was my first retreat at Vajrapani Institute like 25 years ago. And he led us with some very specific instructions about what the mind is, how to meditate on it. And when he did, the result was like in my mind, it was like a door opened onto another dimension. And I was in this vast, luminous space of awareness that I bet some of you have felt too. Overwhelmed by peace, joy, and it was this expansive sense of being that I didn't want to leave. And it was funny when I finally opened my eyes, the whole room was empty. Like everyone was gone. I didn't know how much time had passed, and I was like, "What happened? Where is everybody?" Everyone went to lunch, dinner. I don't know. So why was the second one more effective? I think it's because I had a model of the mind and accurate instructions. Meditation isn't just sitting on your bed and closing your eyes, you know. So if meditation steers the mind toward its best qualities, then it's useful to understand exactly what the mind is. And this is a really juicy discussion because there's no agreed Western model of what the mind is. You might have heard of the ego and the id, you know, the Freudian model. Conscious and the unconscious is an early psychological model. Um, believe it or not, possibly the very most useful model of the mind was made by Pixar. Cory Doctorow, who's the director of Inside Out. Anybody who's seen this movie? It's kind of a kid's movie, but it's really wonderful. I saw it with my daughter. In this movie, so he got really frustrated because he consulted all these scientists, like dozens of the greatest scientists in the world, and said, "What is the mind? What are its qualities? I'm making a character. I'm making a movie. I want to make characters that represent the key aspects of your mind." And some of them said, "Oh, there's 2 parts to the mind." Some said there's 5. Some said there's 21. Some said we don't know at all. And so he got really frustrated. Finally, he's like, "I'm not getting anywhere." After months, he just went home for the weekend. And he said, "I'm just going to draw." and sketch and see like what comes out intuitively based on everything I processed. So he came out with joy, sadness, anger, fear, disgust. If you saw these, they're all they're amazing. Like anger is this little squat square character, like, um, and joy is really like tall and skinny and kind of overactive. And all of these, and now all of these psychologists and counselors and student advisors have said they're so grateful for this movie because now there's a language they can talk about the mind and emotions with everybody. Everybody knows those characters, everybody knows those words. So it's kind of amazing the world we live in, that the best Western model of the mind came from Pixar. So Buddhist models of the mind don't just seek accuracy. They're not just seeking scientific accuracy, but they're seeking benefit. Like, how can we benefit others? And when you're evaluating, in general, kind of everything about Mahayana Buddhism is like that. And so it asks, does this model of the mind help steer your mind towards satisfaction, connection, benevolence, these good qualities? And so they categorize the mind into many different categories. One is categorization into thoughts that are harmful and those are helpful. The harmful ones we call delusions, and the helpful ones we call virtues. Delusions lead to anxiety, aggression, despair. Virtues lead to satisfaction, self-respect, presence. And some of you know this. Delusions, even though they may dominate, they're said to be at the shallowest level of our consciousness. It's so encouraging, isn't it? And then that leads to something really extraordinary. One of the most surprising things about Buddhism that I share with people, because in Mahayana Buddhism, they say that the mind is fundamentally good. And this is also, it's nice to see that there's an overlap between religions and moralities, but there are also differences. And this is a very big difference. In fact, not even all strains of Buddhism say this. This is more like the strain of Buddhism that started about 2000 1700 years ago, like an Abhidharma era, that uh, the mind is fundamentally good. And so it says the delusions are part of um, the contents of the mind, like shallow contents of the mind. And when the Buddhist models look at the mind, they distinguish between the contents of the mind and these mental factors. So there's like some kind of container and there's things within it. It's possible to directly experience that container aspect of the mind, which is the we're going to do that as a second meditation if we have time this evening. If not, we'll do it first thing tomorrow. And so the model that in our lineage that we use is about 2,000 years old, and it lists 51 mental factors in this model from what's called the Abhidharma. And there are 5 of what they call omnipresent mental factors. And these these are one great example of how going beyond mindfulness really, really helps us gain control and analyze our mind, because we have these 5 mental factors they say are always in our mind. The first is contact, that your senses are constantly making contact with reality, sight, sound, smell, touch. The second is perception, that you somehow wrap a bundle of sensory experience with kind of label and see it as one thing. The next is feeling, which isn't emotion, but is the response of like positive, negative, or neutral. And like that you want more of something, less of something, or you don't care. But neutral isn't that good either, right? Because neutral is kind of like indifference. I don't care. Attention is the fourth of these omnipresent mental factors, that you pay attention to some things rather than others. Each of us here is paying attention to some things more than others. I mean, I'm gaining most of your attention, but we each see something. That's how magicians work, right? As magicians understand that we have this mental factor of attention, and if you just manipulate it a little, you can make it seem like things appear and disappear right before your eyes. The last mental factor is urge. I use a kind of a simpler word that I can't remember who this is, but I liked his translation um, instead of volition or other words. Urge is what translates thoughts and feelings into action, that you want to do something about um, your thoughts and feelings, or you actually do something. And so the this may seem kind of, technical, like who cares? Why do I need to know these 5 things? But I'll tell you that understanding these mental factors is more powerful than mindfulness, or can be, because we learn that those 5 mental factors, the 4 of them are just about automatic. You really can't control them. But there's one place where you can stop the chain from perception to urge, which is that feeling. It's that positive, negative, neutral response that you have to things, which is where you can pause and decide whether or not to follow those feelings. And so, with mindfulness, if you can slow down your mind at that mental factor of feeling that, oh, this feels good, this is unpleasant, I don't care, then you can have a choice about whether it drives you to pursue an urge, like to actually say something, do something. Um, this is very subtle. I don't know how many people knew that already or remember hearing that teaching. It's quite a subtle point, but I think a very powerful one. That feeling is the mental factor that, if you can attend to it, you really gain control over your mind. There's also something really mind-blowing about perception, which is that perception is psychological. None of us has direct access to physical reality, even though it might seem like it. So instead, what we each apprehend are the processed sensory signals that appear to our mind. And from these, we construct a model of reality in our heads. So light is just the vibration of invisible electromagnetic energy at different frequencies. There's no red, no orange, no yellow, no green, no blue in the world. I'm not quoting Buddhist scriptures. Like, this is just true. Red is invisible. It's just all of this energy, all of the way that the universe vibrates. All of it passes through each other, right? So all of those things are psychological constructs. And to become aware of that is so unbelievable. At this like 0th step of the lamrim, to become aware of that is so beneficial. That this red, it really does only exist in your mind. It doesn't mean there's nothing out there. There is something out there. There is vibrating electromagnetic energy, but it's not red. That's all. We only see that in our mind. It's the same thing with sound. Sound is silent, right? All you have is vibrating air. Air vibrates. This is true based on my vocal cords. Very subtle, right? The vibration. But air vibrations are silent. They don't make a sound. It's your ears and your brain that transforms silent vibration into the mental constructs of noise, words, music. That's why music is sometimes like the greatest object of meditating on emptiness, this highest meditation in Buddhism. Because of all the things, like, where is music? Where do you find it? This also, have any of you ever heard Berkeley, where I live, is named after this Bishop Berkeley, who is a philosopher, an English philosopher. And he's famous. Does anyone know the question he's famous for asking? If a tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound? He's a philosopher that said that. So Buddhism has a really clear answer. No, it does not make a sound. Definitely not. Because the sound is only in your mind. Air will vibrate when the tree falls. But if there isn't a brain, a mind there to process silent vibrating air into a sound, it doesn't make a sound. So now you know the answer. I wish he was still alive here to debate, but it'd be fun. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is this idea of immateriality. So People kind of freak out when you start to talk about the mind on its own, especially when you say that the mind is immaterial, because they think it means something supernatural. And so what I like to say to people, because again, all of this is geared towards a point of view where you don't need to believe anything except what science currently tells us about reality in order to practice this version of the lamrim. But what I like to tell people is, oh, you don't believe in the mind is immaterial. Okay. You already believe in immaterial things. I say this to the most hardcore materialist scientists. I say, do you believe in math? And they say, yeah. I say, where is it? Is it in the math textbook? Is that where math is? Is it outside in gravity? Like, where's gravity? We don't have a math detector, but it doesn't mean math doesn't exist. It's immaterial, but it's very, very useful, and it's real. It's real. I also then like to say, do you believe in love? Right? Because if you do, where is it? It's in a love letter. Do people even write love letters anymore? It's sort of sad, huh? But I have a bunch from my wife, and I wrote her a bunch. She still has them. Um, but is my love for her in those love letters? Now people get a heart emoji on your phone. I got some today from my wife, and when I see it, I feel so good. Don't you? Like when you get the heart emoji from somebody you care about, you feel loved. So is the love in those red and pink pixels? Is that where the love is? We don't have a love detector either. And then the last thing I'd like to say, I was trained as a computer scientist and an artist. Those are kind of my jobs, I guess, before I became. I like to joke. I used to be a part-time Buddhist and now a full-time Buddhist. So I like to think about software. When I first found computer programs, I thought they were so unbelievable because to me they were like mind. They're immaterial, but they did things. And so this is a good example. If you have a phone, you would never say this is Instagram, right? You'd say, oh, I need to pick up my Instagram. No, this is your phone, and Instagram runs on it. But where's Instagram? Is it the app on your phone? If it's disconnected from the internet, the app doesn't work. So, oh, you have an answer. It's in the metaverse. Yeah, right. So the cloud, is it in the cloud? So people talk about the cloud. My daughter asked me once, she said, where's the cloud? And I said, it's in Utah. We've actually driven by it. It's right there. That big gray building. There's the cloud. It's not really a cloud, it's a big building in Utah. There's some in Virginia too. Maybe there's some here. I don't know. Albuquerque. Nice, high, safe place. So anyway, we'd never say, you can't find it. Search for Instagram. You can't find it. It's all over the place. It's everywhere. It's nowhere. But it's not material. It's not real. It's a changing pattern of information that depends on the hardware and the hardware of your phone, the person operating it. But it isn't the computer, the phone. And so it's the same with the mind. Once you go through those three examples, um, it's not that weird anymore to say the mind is a pattern of information that just passes through matter, right? It's not so strange, and you don't have to get all mystical with people and say, oh, it passes into another realm when you die. Like maybe it does, um, but you don't have to believe those things. You don't have to believe in a soul or other realms or any of that to say the mind is immaterial. It's not a big deal. Um, so great, we have some time. So we have time for the meditation on mental factors. Um, so why don't we do that? But do people need any tiny break or anything like that? Okay. So I can keep going. Okay, then I'll tend to do that. Then we'll stick with like 90-minute sessions. So yeah, let's do this meditation on mental factors. And if we have time, maybe we'll go into nature of mind meditations. We'll see. Or maybe it would be better to do some questions actually after this. Yeah. Okay, so get back into your meditation posture. What I like about beginning the session with the meditation is like technically we're all still in meditation session. So just rekindle that, straighten your back, half close your eyes. Remember your hands and what they mean. And set a motivation to gradually bring out the qualities of our mind that lead to happiness, connection, positive action in the world. And let's just focus on the breath for half a minute to stabilize the mind. And now we're going to inquire into our mind, in particular its mental factors. And we're going to start with this mental factor of perception to see if we can observe it in action. So let whatever sensory experiences naturally occur arise in your mind. You may notice how your mind perceives my voice, other sounds in the distance, cars driving by, the hum of lights, machinery, fans, breathing. And with your eyes closed, you might notice how you have an awareness of the furniture in the room, the tension in your muscles, air moving across your skin. And then start to notice how you attach a mental label to these bundles of sensory information so that each perception seems separate, clearly identified as a sound, sensation, object. Notice how your continuous experience of thought also gets broken into discrete bundles. That's a memory. That's a plan. That's a worry. That's boredom. That's excitement. So for a minute, look at your feelings, thought, thought through this lens of perception. Just seeing the thoughts that pass through your mind. And then So without trying to control what arises in your mind, now look at the mental factor of feeling. So let anything come naturally into your attention only to the feeling associated with perception or that thought. Whether it's a sound, a body sensation, thought, memory. Try to notice whether a pleasant or unpleasant or neutral feeling comes with it, and completely accept whatever it is without ruling or identifying. Just let whatever comes into your mind, whatever you perceive and feel, arise and pay attention to those feelings. This is the really important one because if we come to be aware of the feeling that arises, whether we thought, perception, then we gain more control as to whether we're driven by those feelings to create more experience and run away from others. Okay. So now notice the component of your mind that wants to do something about your feelings. It might be wanting to shift your body to a more comfortable position, to go to sleep, to check your messages. This part of your mind doesn't just experience thoughts, perceptions, feelings, but it also has an intention to act. So whether subtle or strong, see if you notice this component of urge that's wrapped up with every moment of consciousness without needing to act on it. All of us were taught, especially in our country, to freedom is the freedom. meditation like this reveals that the true freedom is the freedom not to, not to. Just to let go, just watch them pass by. And you can lighten your attention from as we enter the last part of the meditation, the dedication. That in a few minutes, we've gained some increased awareness of our mind's mental factors. I have learned this tip about feeling, and that's the place where we can stop the automatic chain of thought and action. And so we can aspire that whatever positive changes occur in our mind through this meditation, increased awareness of our mind's mental factors, that it help us gain more control over how we respond to objects and thoughts and experiences in our everyday. Then you can come out of meditation. And so the next meditation is to talk about what consciousness is, what the container of the mind is, and some wonderful meditations where we gain a direct experience of the mind. But I think since we have 15 minutes left, maybe it's nice just to have a little Q&A if people have any, and then we could start with those meditations tomorrow. Yeah. Oh, to the microphone. Sorry. Well, for the people on Zoom, yeah.
Is what we just did analytical meditation? Because I haven't quite grasped that concept yet.
Yeah. So in general, the stabilizing or mindfulness meditation is a meditation where you focus on something, usually the breath, try to keep your mind on it, and let anything else just go by. And so we did some meditation like that in every one of our sessions, and we will always do some of it. But then when your mind starts to use thoughts that steer your mind toward different mental experiences that bring out good qualities, like in this case, the purpose of this meditation on the mental factors is to understand how the mind works and figure out how to slow it down, also to gain some sense of awe and the beauty of our mind, and to see that place in feeling of that's where we can stop it. That's where mindfulness works the best, is to see, oh, when I'm feeling, that feels good. That doesn't feel good. I don't care about that. That's actually this like pivot point when your thoughts turn into actions. And if you can start to see that occurring, like, um, oh, it feels nice when I have a sip of tea. Um, just to realize that, realize that, or it doesn't feel nice, seeing that homeless person on the sidewalk, or I don't care about that person I just bought my coffee from. It's very powerful just to become aware of that, actually, because those feelings lead to other actions and how we see the world. So yeah, in general, analytical meditation or any of these meditations that use thoughts, feelings, stories, emotions, images, critical thinking to steer the mind toward its best qualities. And we'll do a lot more. So, yeah.
There was a comment online that when you do the meditation you're talking. It's just a little bit too low
Oh, no.
for the people online.
Oh, okay. I can speak louder, sure.
What I noticed was, well, I really appreciate that meditation, first off, it was very helpful. And I did notice sadness arise. And if I was at home, I probably would have went to the pantry and got something to eat.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just kind of allowed that.
That is such a useful observation because I learned only recently like why we do that, like why eating and drinking are a response sometimes to, you know, negative emotions. And it's actually adaptive in that there's this model of another model of mind is that this comes from this guy Carl Rönke, and he says we have three states of mind. There's comfort, you know, we're kind of comfortable, you know, peace at home, relaxed. There's growth. Probably everyone's in that right now, growth, where we're stretching ourselves a bit, like, oh, you know, questioning things, stretching. And then there's panic, which I think people are in a lot more than usual these days for a variety of reasons. And so, in that mode, that's something evolutionary. Like panic is something that helps us when there's a real danger. You know, it used to be there's a saber-toothed tiger chasing you or something. And so it shuts down. One of the things it does is it shuts down your digestive system. So it says, well, we don't need to digest food. We just need all the energy to go to our muscles and the like primitive brain to make us run away as fast as possible or fight if we have to. And so when you have a drink of water or anything, or you have a little snack, it actually tells your body that it's okay, that it's calm. So it's so nice to hear that, isn't that? Because you can kind of feel bad about it. It's like, oh, I'm just like eating to. No, it's actually so adaptive. Like it does something. And I just learned this like a month ago. I learned it from a wonderful book I read by Kazuhaga, who's like an activist. And so that's another form of like analytical meditation. Like I find it really helps to know why. You know, I always hated it when I'd ask my parents, you know, they want me to, so I'd say why. They say, oh, because. No, that's not good if you're a parent. You really want to be able to explain why. So isn't it? I found it really helpful to understand, like, not just that, because it is actually quite useful to say, oh, I have that urge to go eat something. I can just let it pass by. That's very powerful already. But then to understand, oh, you know, it's not, I'm not a bad person for having that urge. In fact, it's adaptive. It's like it kept my ancestors alive so that I could be here to want that cookie to help me relax. But if you look then, oh, it's actually, I'm already full. I already had enough food and it's not beneficial to have another cookie, you know. Thanks for bringing that up. But did you have anything else to say about that?
I guess I was just thinking about like interacting with people, with family members that, and we talk about, you know, these urges and to pause. I mean, how can we program ourselves to pause and not act
Yeah.
in a negative way? Or say something
Yeah.
that's rude.
Well, that'll get to the topic of cause and effect, which we'll get to, I don't know, I think maybe towards the end of tomorrow. But I'll tell you, you know, the simple version of it is the rehearsing in your mind. You know, so it's another form of analytical meditation where you get ready for that situation. And you either imagine a situation where you didn't do that well, you know, where you did blow up at somebody, and then and we'll talk more about how to deal with that when you feel bad about it. But then you rehearse in your mind what I would have rather done instead. that you actually really, I find that because sometimes a lot of us in this tradition, we have like a huge list of prayers and things we need to do every morning. But some mornings, I find that my mind naturally goes to something, some conflict I had with my wife, you know. And then I actually just let go. I let go of the prayers I was going to do and just let myself think about that for a while. Like that's another really good form of analytical meditation because you think, okay, what was going on there? Why did I do that? What did I do? What was I feeling? What could I do instead? Like this is one of the most beneficial forms of analytical meditation I find is, and again, we'll do it in cause and effect, but what could I have done instead? And then you really need to act it out in your mind. You really imagine yourself like if my wife was acting grumpy, you know, and then I take it personally and then be like, oh, you know, what's wrong with you? You know, like, let's, you know, start a fight. Instead, here's what I rehearse in my mind. I think, oh, I don't say that. I say, oh, what's going on for you? You know, she's kind of grumpy, says something, snaps at me. I'm like, hey, what's going on for you right now? I had to rehearse that like 100 times or 1,000 times, you know, but then it sinks in. So I think, you know, you in some ways you think, oh, analytical meditation is like brainwashing, but actually everything's brainwashing. One of the things, there's so many sad things we're exposed to. Um, One thing I learned when writing this book is that your average person by age 18 has seen 100,000 murders on television. You know, fictional ones, but still. What does that do to your mind? You know, of course, you normalize violence as a solution to problems, like, and then, but it leads to real violence, you know, and voting to approve wars and things like that. Oh, no other way than to go send some bombs, missiles, soldiers. Might be necessary sometimes, but normalizing violence like that makes you just jump to that solution. Like, oh, guess we have to go kill some people. So yeah, every thought and feeling we have. Again, a lot of things that there's huge debates about in society. There's not that much debate from the Buddhist worldview, like, oh, is it bad to play? Is it harmful to play violent video games? Of course it is. Of course it has an effect if you sit there and are imagining you're killing people. And I've done it too, by the way. I'm not saying you have to give it up, but to recognize, I mean, if you're very highly evolved, you could say, oh, I'm destroying my delusions, you know, like you have a kind of metaphorical, but I don't think most people do that when you're playing video games. Of course it has an effect on your mind. Like it's funny we have these debates in society, but if you have that's the thing. If everyone was meditating, you just know for yourself. You don't have to have like a congressional hearing as to whether video games harm people. You just watch your own mind. Go play a video game with your kid or yourself. Then go meditate and look at your mind and see what it wants to do. I remember my brother had me play Grand Theft Auto. He got into that game a long time ago, like 20 years ago, and we played it for like 4 hours, you know, or something. And then I was driving somewhere and I stopped at a stoplight and I had this urge to get out and steal the guy's car next to me, like to get out and pull him out and steal his car. And I was like, oh my God, like this is what it does to you. Like, of course. And you see, now we have this language, right? I had a feeling, I had an urge. Like it sounds sort of boring when I first say it, but it's so interesting and so powerful to understand feeling, to understand urge, and to become aware of it. Like that was, I felt scared, but also kind of grateful that at least I was aware of my mind. Like, wow, that's what that video game did to me. It made me want to steal someone's car. And I'm sure you've been out riding on freeways too. You see people driving like 100, 120 miles sometimes. I'm telling you, they got that from the video game. They got that because it's you're doing it and it's fun. And then you go out in real life, but you can kill it. You'll lose your whole life just in an instant. Um, any other questions? Thank you. That was a really good conversation. Any other questions or comments? Oh yeah, online. Oh, okay. That's just a rhetorical statement. Well, I'll tell you something. This is actually, as you can see, I really enjoy talking about these things, meditating. And it's actually, this is kind of one of my dreams I had kind of early on when I got invited to start leading meditations 18 years ago. And something I always wished for was that meditation would be cool enough that it's something people wanted to do on a Friday night. And so here we are on a Friday night, people mostly smiling, having a good time, getting some insights. That's kind of my dream. That's just really my dream as a person. Once I got into meditation, is like, this is really cool. It's really fun, really interesting, and super beneficial. So, um, if there aren't any more questions, then I think we're right on time. And I just aspire that, um, well, we already did a dedication, but may whatever benefit that comes from this really meaningful conversation and meditation ripen in our lives in the kindness we show others, the kindness we show to ourselves, first of all, and gaining some insights into how to help the world. I think a lot of us feel despair. We don't know what to do. That we can be patient with ourselves, and also that it might pop into our minds at some point what it is we can do to benefit the world. Something I think of often is a quote from Stuart Brand, who created the Whole Earth Catalog a long time ago. He's a great author. He said, good things happen slowly, bad things happen fast. So may good things happen slowly to all of us. And I really look forward to seeing you tomorrow and Sunday if you're coming back. And we'll meditate on the nature of the mind and then the precious life, impermanence, cause and effect, where we'll talk about, how to deal with difficult conflicts in our life. Refuge, which is actually, I call, what do you do when you're alone? Good question to ask. Um, how to let go of suffering, renunciation. Those are all the topics. Well, if we have time, those are all the topics we're going to go through. It's like 2/3 of what comes from the lamrim. So hopefully I'll see you all soon. Tomorrow at 10, right? Starts. Okay.